All right, time to dive into some French politics, huh? We're doing a deep dive on the French budget proposed for 2025.
Yeah, should be interesting.
But first things first, I keep seeing these headlines about France facing a pretty hefty budget deficit.
Yeah, it's significant. If nothing changes, projections show it reaching, get this, 7% of GDP by December 2025.
7%, that's huge.
It's a big chunk of their economy. So naturally, the government is scrambling for solutions. Their plan seems to be a mix of spending cuts and, you guessed it, tax increases.
Always a joy.
Right. And this is where Prime Minister Michel Barnier is really walking a tightrope, trying to keep everyone happy.
Because he's got to balance that left-leaning, the Democrats, with his more fiscally conservative
Yeah,
Republicans, right? To keep that common ground coalition together.
exactly.
So where do they even begin to tackle a deficit that big? What's their strategy?
Well, one of the most talked about proposals, and it's causing quite the stir, is this idea of exceptional contributions.
Okay, for those of us who don't speak fluent French tax code, what exactly are exceptional contributions?
Basically, think of them as one-time taxes. A way to quickly generate a large chunk of cash to, try and get a handle on that looming deficit.
Makes sense. So who are they targeting with these one-time taxes?
Well, the target audience seems to be large corporations and, drumroll, high-income individuals.
Ah, the old you've got more, you contribute more strategy.
Right. It's all about economic balancing, or at least that's how they're framing it. Asking those who have benefited the most to shoulder a bit more of the burden during this, shall we say, time of need.
I can see the logic there, but I can only imagine that sparking some debate.
Oh, absolutely. And it's coming from both sides of the aisle.
How so?
Well, some argue that, singling out specific groups like this is unfair, and that it could even backfire, stifling economic growth.
Because if those groups are hurting, everyone hurts.
Exactly. But then, on the other hand, you have those who see it as completely necessary, a necessary evil to address the deficit, promote
There's
fairness.
that age-old dilemma, isn't it? Balancing economic growth with social welfare. And here we see it playing out on the French stage.
Exactly. It's a global dilemma. But it's fascinating to see how France chooses to address it.
It is. So let's dive into some specifics. What are some of the proposals that jumped out from these articles?
Well, something that immediately caught my eye, because it affects, well, everyone, is the proposed increase in electricity taxes.
Oh, ouch. That's going to hit some people hard,
Yeah.
especially with the cost of living already on everyone's mind.
It is. A lot of folks are understandably concerned, so it'll be interesting to see how that one fares in the budget battle. Will it survive? Will they tweak it? We'll see.
Fingers crossed they tweak it.
Right. And speaking of recurring themes, this one is fascinating and controversial. It's the exceptional maritime transport tax.
Ah, yes. This one seems to be causing quite a stir, at least from what I gathered from the LCP Assemblée Nationale article. What's the story there?
Well, in a nutshell, it specifically targets CMA CGM.
Which is...
Oh, sorry. CMA CGM is a major French shipping company.
Ah, got it. So they're singling out a specific company
They are. And that's what's causing all the fuss. Some politicians are really pushing back against this.
because it sets a dangerous precedent.
Precisely. Even if it's a major player in the global market, is it fair to single out individual companies? That's the question.
It's a tough one, for sure. Almost feels like using a scalpel when a hammer might be more appropriate.
Exactly.
So we've got potential tax hikes on electricity and this whole debate over the maritime tax. It's a lot to unpack.
It is, and we're just getting started. There's still a lot more to discuss, like the fact that some big corporations might be losing some of their beloved tax breaks.
Well, that got my attention. What's the story there?
Speaking of shaping the future, there's another proposal, a bit more technical but equally important, that specifically impacts employee stock options. It has to do with something called the BSPCE regime.
Okay, you're going to have to break that one down for me. BSP what now?
BSPCE stands for Bonus Souscription de Part de Créateur d'Entreprise. It's a mouthful, I know.
Don't worry about it. We're all friends here.
Right, so essentially it refers to employee stock options, particularly within startups, and the proposed changes would affect how those options are taxed.
So potentially a big deal for both employees and the startups themselves.
Potentially, yes. But again, it's all in the details, and those details are still being fiercely debated.
It's fascinating stuff. All these little tweaks and adjustments, they really add up. Like they're trying to fine-tune the entire system to steer the economy in a certain direction.
Yeah, it's strategic, for sure. And it's not just about startups and big corporations either. There's this whole other part of the budget that could really impact individuals who, maybe rent out furnished properties.
Oh yeah, you mean those, what was it? Loueur Immeuble Non Professionnel,
Exactly. They're called LMNPs for short.
LMNP. Got it.
Mm.
So who are they and what's changing for them?
Well, basically, LMNPs are individuals who rent out furnished properties, but it's not their main gig, you know? Like, imagine someone renting out a second home or something. And the proposed change would affect the taxes they pay on capital gains from selling those properties.
So they're losing a tax break.
Essentially, yeah, it could mean higher taxes for some property owners if they decide to sell.
Interesting. So we've got potential increases on electricity and now this for the LMNPs. Seems like they're really trying to cover all their bases with this budget.
It's about spreading the love, right?
Or maybe spreading the tax burden would be a better way to put it.
Huh, yeah, maybe. But seriously, it's all a balancing act, trying to incentivize growth in some areas, generate revenue in others, and of course, trying to keep everyone happy, which is probably the hardest part.
Especially with a coalition government. It's like herding cats, right?
Something like that. But that's why this whole process is so fascinating to watch.
It is. And speaking of watching, you know what I was really impressed with? The coverage from LCP Assemblée Nationale. They really did a deep dive on the politics of it all.
Oh, for sure. Their analysis of all the different amendments proposed, who's aligning with whom, it was really insightful.
It's a good thing we've got you to break it all down for us.
Happy to help make sense of it all.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. The deficit, the taxes, the political maneuvering. Where do we even go from here?
Well, I think it's worth highlighting a few more specific proposals because they really give us a glimpse into the government's priorities, what they're really focusing on.
Right. Didn't one of the articles mention potential changes to this malice automobile?
Ah, yes. That's the penalty system for purchasing vehicles with high carbon emissions.
So are they talking about making it stricter?
That seems to be the gist of it, yeah. It's part of a larger push to make France a greener country, reduce their carbon footprint, all that.
Makes sense.
Although, there are naturally concerns about how this will impact the automotive industry in France.
Right, because it's a big industry there.
Exactly. So it'll be interesting to see how they balance those economic concerns with their environmental goals.
It's really interesting to see how much emphasis they're putting on these green initiatives, weaving them right into the budget like this.
Yeah, it's not just lip service. It's clear that environmental concerns are playing a key role in shaping their economic policy.
It really highlights their long-term vision for France.
Absolutely. This budget isn't just about putting out fires, it's about making fundamental changes, setting the stage for a more, hopefully, sustainable and prosperous future.
And it makes you wonder, what kind of message does this send to the rest of the world? I mean, France isn't exactly a small player on the global stage.
Right, their actions tend to have ripple effects.
Exactly. So if they're really serious about tackling climate change, about rethinking their economic model, it could influence other countries to follow suit.
Oh, absolutely. It's a global game, and what one major power does often influences the others.
It really drives home that point, doesn't it? What might seem like a local news story, the French budget,
Yeah.
actually has global implications.
It does, and it reminds us that these economic decisions, they're not just about numbers on a spreadsheet.
Right, they have real-world consequences for businesses, for individuals, for the environment.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, is there anything else that really sticks out to you? Anything you keep coming back to?
What I find most fascinating about this whole budget proposal is the sheer ambition of it. I mean, they're not just trying to balance the books here, they're trying to fundamentally reshape aspects of their economy.
They're playing the long game.
Exactly. And it's risky. I mean, who knows how these changes will actually play out in the long run?
That's the billion-euro question, isn't it?
It is. Will it work? Will it backfire? We'll have to wait and see.
I guess that's the nature of deep dives like this, more questions than answers.
Oh, wait.
But hey, at least we're asking the right questions, right?
Yeah.
And on that note, we'll leave it there for today. But I want to hear from you, our listeners. What are your thoughts on this proposed French budget?
Yeah, what jumped out at you?
Head over to our website, leave a comment, send us an email. We love hearing from you. And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.